Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I have a question for you. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? You know that 23andMe swab kit you got for the holidays, maybe even for Mother's Day? Maybe you got one upcoming for Father's Day, maybe you got one for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever holidays you celebrate, and you were just so excited about sending that off to a company that you don't know anything about. You have no idea what they're doing with that information. Because, you know, the whole system of DNA is comparing your DNA to everybody else's DNA to see where the patterns are. Well, that doesn't sound like it's a piece of very personal information. You certainly gave them license to use it. But what if there was somebody who was interested in what happened to that DNA? Maybe somebody that you don't want to be interested in your DNA. That is the plot line of this biblical thriller. Best-selling book, The Codist, taking you on a journey because Satan wants to know who you are because there's a Y chromosome marker from the line of Aaron. And until the Sanhedrin reforms and gathers together to call for the return of Jesus, he doesn't come back. If there was a way to take out that line that you might be a part of, then he would continue to rule this earth. That is the story behind the best-selling book, The Codist, right now available to you at Amazon via Kindle for just $2.99. Get your copy today. And visit our website, ignitinganation.com. Click on special offers, and you're going to find a yellow cover of a book, my latest book called The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. I'm going to take you on a journey in the Garden of Eden, where God uses the things of the natural to reveal supernatural truth. Now, you're going to click on the cover of this book on the website, and there's a little box that's going to come up. We're going to ask you for your email. We won't send you spam because spam is not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book for free. As we take you on a journey from the ground all the way out to the fruit of that tree and reveal 7 laws and 7 lessons within each one of those as we take a journey through lessons learned from the Tree of Life. Get your copy today. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our guest, Mike Tikkanen, author of Invisible Children and What We Can Do About It. Mike has owned and operated an auto recycling business, garment manufacturing company, and small business consulting firm since graduating from Morehead University in 1974. Researching issues that impact children has been a part of his life for many years. He entered the child protection system as a volunteer guardian ad litem in the mid-1990s. Mike's book and public speaking are his efforts to bring public attention to core problems that are impacting schools, healthcare, crime, and quality of life for many Americans. Mike lives in Minnesota with his best friend and wife, Kathy. You can find more information at www.invisiblechildren.org. Mike Tikkanen, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mike, what was it about the really the calling to get involved in the Guardian Ad Litem program some 20 plus years ago? What was it that was compelling for you personally to jump into this system of representing the rights of those who don't have a voice of their own?
A friend of mine had adopted 4 children, and the county had misled her as to the mental health of those children. It was compelling. I felt so sorry for her and the children that when the opportunity came to me to be a guardian ad litem, I just stuck my toe in the water, and here I am so many years later, quite passionate about how we treat at-risk children.
What do you define an at-risk child as?
Well, I am in child protection, and every state's a little different. The imminent harm doctrine is the only legal protection that children have in the United States. And that basically says that a judge has the right to remove a child if his or her life is in danger. And to repeat, that's the only real law that protects children. They have no rights. And if you investigate that a little further, you find out that the United States of America is the only nation in the world that has not signed the international rights of the Child Treaty. And as I've worked with children that have been abused, I've seen the courts send children home back to abusive homes. I've seen terrible things happen to children. About half the 50 children that I've removed from homes, terrible homes where they've been sexually abused, beaten, starved, things that I don't like to talk about, but I feel must be talked about because they are so awful. And if we don't talk about them, there's not a problem. Nobody knows. And if nobody knows, there's no solutions. If there's no solutions, things continue to get worse. It's a big problem.
How expansive is the problem across the United States?
Wow, that's the core question. I want to approach it from two different angles. The first angle is Art Rolnick, who did work with the Federal Reserve Bank many years ago, proving that early childhood programs were the best investment that a nation could make with its tax dollars. And there's research from 2003 that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that these kids can go on to lead normal lives if they get the help they need when they need it. Now, his research involved more than the children in child protection. If you took my children, I have a boy that has cost the county over $3 million by the time he aged out of foster care. That did not include the people he stabbed, the teacher he beat up, the terrible things he did to 29 foster families that tried to help him. The mental health issues at the core of the work that I do are just gigantic. What it really means is these children don't heal. And if they don't heal, they become a problem for society. 30, 40, 50 years of being in the criminal justice system. Recidivism at a federal level now is reaching 80% in the federal prisons. I've got kids that really have been state wards from the time they were 6 or 7, and now they're 40, they're 35, and I don't see it changing. And really, the cost is the harm they do to us. They impact the schools, they impact our community safety, and really, it's all a very fixable thing. And it would be far less expensive to help these children heal through trauma-informed services and crisis nurseries and quality daycare. These things could really save us a lot of money, but we're such short-term thinkers financially that we don't have a mental health program outside of Prozac and Prozac-like drugs for a lot of 5-year-olds. As a matter of fact, in 2014, we put 21,000 1- and 2-year-old children on Prozac. Can you believe that? I could go on about the psychotropic medications. It's a very big problem, and it's not saving us any money to not provide mental health services for children in child protection.
In your opinion, what role should government play in this? What role should the local church play in this? What role should social services play in this? Because as I've examined this particular issue, there seems to be a pattern of, on both sides of this equation, families who have worked the system to be compensated for taking in foster children and providing less than substantial environments for their mental health and their development, but yet they get the full benefit and value and have become a cottage industry, if you will, and are in the system themselves and have profited extensively because of the services that they appear to offer but don't really offer. And then you have the other side of the role of government. Now, all of a sudden, we have these notable celebrity individuals taking their lives, and the increase in suicide rates are now identifying that maybe this is bigger than the opioid crisis that they're throwing all this money into. Maybe this is also a part of this larger mental health issue of all the things we've introduced into society, which is gender identity, which is basically no one measures up to the standard of ethnos, which is the Greek term for what we would misappropriate and call it race, but ethnos was the standard of perfection. The Adonis was the standard for what the perfect male looked like, and the standard of all these statues, the statuary. This was Hitler's model. This was the Ayatollah's model in Iran, creating a perfect race of people. This is where the concept of ethnos comes from, is creating a standard under which to measure everyone else under. And who can measure up to a standard that shifts from one side to the next? You're always going to fall short of the mark, because the standard changes from one day to the next, let alone from one generation to the next generation. Mike, what is your feeling as to the root cause of this problem?
The core issue is that childhood trauma lasts forever. We have a misconception of what mental health is in this country. The DSM is on its way out. At some point, we're not going to use the standard. With labeling, basically, is what we've done with mental health for 50, 60 years.
What is DSM?
It's that book that is used by all mental health experts to label the mental health illnesses that people have. It's 1,500 pages long, it's huge, and it really means nothing to the children that I've worked with. And to put a point on the numbers, 37% of American children are reported to child protection by the time they're 18, unless they're from African American families. Now it's 54%. If you talk about children aging out of foster care, 80% of them lead dysfunctional lives. Our prison populations, our murder rates, all the things that we used to be competitive with are now so much higher than the rest of the industrialized world. One of my board members at Kids at Risk Action, our nonprofit, made public policy in Europe for 10 years. And when he came home to the United States and became a CASA guardian ad litem like me, and started to try to articulate the difference between how the rest of the world, really the 20 nations after the Second World War, rebuilt themselves by starting more crisis nurseries, taking care of young families, making sure that the mental health issues were addressed. We've built prisons. We've made a punishment model out of America. Our kids really don't get the help they need. Trauma-informed services will show you that you can't punish a tortured child. You can't. It won't work. They're going to come back at you. You stand between one of my kids and the door and you touch the wrong button, you get hurt. And these are big numbers. 80 million kids in the United States of America. We're getting 6 to 7 million kids a year reported to child protection. The systems are overwhelmed. I feel so sorry for the people doing the work, whether they be educators, police, or social workers. It doesn't matter. And when you talk about foster families, I'm very, very sensitive to how hard it is for foster families to deal with the level of mental health issues that we're actually facing every day right now. Being a foster parent is not easy. And yes, you're right. There aren't the resources. There isn't the training. People do not understand the depth and scope of the mental health issues that we're here talking about today. I have worked for many, many years with really troubled children, and I've learned that most of what we're doing isn't quite right. A lot of it's quite wrong. And I'm not blaming the people. It's not the individuals doing the work. I never blame social workers, teachers, or police. I feel so sorry for them. The turnover rates are high. The results they get are terrible. So bless them for doing the work. There needs to be a full frontal approach, an attack from all sides of society, whether it be churches, the religious community, government's got to step forward. There's a lot of things that have to be fixed. Individually, we need to learn more about the depth and scope of the problem we're dealing with. It really is a mental health issue. And once we understand the nature of trauma, and I'm going to repeat the thing about the World Health Organization saying that the definition of torture is extended exposure to violence and deprivation. And we're beginning to understand what PTSD is in soldiers. A soldier can look back on his or her life and say, I had a life. I was a normal person. Then this happened to me. Children can't. You are where you were born. You will be where you come from. Generally, the families I deal with are third, fourth, and fifth generation of abused children having their own abused children. No parenting skills, a drunken boyfriend, a violent boyfriend, a drug habit, raising children. It won't work that way. If the community is going to change, and when it does change, those children are well. When you break the cycle of abuse, the children then go on to lead a normal life and functioning members of society. We haven't done that for many years. Some years ago, I spoke at the Women Prison Wardens Annual Conference. The woman before me that spoke had been working the Cook County prisons in Chicago for many years. She was retiring. Her argument was that The number of children had by the women in Cook County prisons at that time had grown from 2 to 4 in her tenure. Her projection on the way of her retirement was going to go to 4 to 6. This is about 10 years ago. My take on it now is that it's at least 6, maybe 7. I've been involved in families with 8 children and been there for 14 years with one family. I can tell you that we need to understand what we're dealing with, and the core starts with mental health. Once we understand how to deal with the trauma, then these kids can heal, families can heal, and all of us need to participate. We have a college program that we're putting together to show up in campuses called the Invisible Children Campus Program, where we tell these stories through graphics, videos, stories, so people begin to understand it's a rather complex thing. But they have to know, and we have to cooperate. We have to care about these kids and try to make it better for them.
Mike, at the heart of this is the issue that you and I discussed before we went on air. And one of the contributing factors is the literacy rate of the parents, then passing the literacy rate down to their children because the parent is not equipped to teach their child to read, therefore their child suffers. And we find that the literacy rate in America has, the illiteracy rate has skyrocketed, and there's a direct correlation between the prison system and the youth offenders and their literacy rates, which are far below the acceptable standards. Now, this is just one of the areas that we need to address in shoring up. I have to share with you a personal experience. I'm an adoptive parent, and I adopt in the state of California, which has some of the toughest regulations and laws regarding adoption. There can be no contact between the adoptive parent and the birth mother. You have to have an intermediary. I had to have full background checks. I had to have FBI through a national registry, and I had to have local police do a background check on me. So I had 2, federal level and local and state level. I had to go to school to become a parent. And before I could become an adoptive parent, I first had to be certified as a foster parent because there is a 3-month window in which you are the foster parent before you're able to have your hearing to hear the adoption petition, because they have 90 days for the birth mother to change her mind and make a decision unless you release the child to an adoption agency, and then they terminate, the adoption agency terminates the mother's rights, and they place the child with you, and you're accountable to the adoption agency, who then sends people out to check on the development and how things are. They do an advanced home study. All these things are done to adopt a child. None of these things are done to procreate. None of these things are done, and I have a very happy, healthy, successful 29-year-old daughter that was adopted at birth because of the rigorous training that we received and how to parent and what are some of the pitfalls and the speed bumps and the barriers that pop up. What are the things that you're going to have to deal with abandonment issues? And she was a C-section baby, and we had to go through training on the difference between a natural birth canal child and a C-section child that have different psychological issues that develop over a lifetime. So we were schooled and trained before we could hold that baby in our hands. And here it is 29 years later. I reflect on that and say, wow, we should require pediatricians, OBGYNs should have classes, parenting classes, if you're going to deliver that baby, the same way I won't marry a couple unless I have premarital counseling with them. There should be something done at the time of determination that a woman is pregnant, that we have some educational awareness for parents. I know I appreciate, as I look back on the parenting advice I was given, not that I followed all of it, I can assure you I did not, but education and awareness is what makes a nation strong. And we don't do that at all. All we do is treat medically and not make any decisions, or I guess the medical profession would consider that to be crossing the line in recommending. But if it was something that every parent needed to do, and it was offered as a service of an organization, I think that would be incredible, especially in the communities that are easily identifiable as having the highest level of need. Would you agree with that?
Well, I go way beyond that. I am stunned that this nation has so little concern overall for prenatal care, helping to make sure a family has a safe and healthy birth. It hurts me terrifically to think that we have these huge fights about abortion, but if you get to look at the number of foster parents we don't have, on the invisiblechildren.org website, under real stories and then sad stories, we report every month in every state about foster parents, adoption, about the issues in those states and what they're doing or what they're not doing. It will hurt your brain if you go and spend time on that particular page. We've reported for many years, and since, it's not gotten better. As a matter of fact, the foster parenting problem is endemic in the United States. There's so little training. And again, the children we're talking about are having more and more mental health issues. We've used and relied on Prozac, Ritalin, Zoloft, psychotropic medications for year after year after year. And by the way, in 2014, we also fined the big pharma companies billions and billions, many billions, $10 billion for illegally selling those drugs to pediatricians for use on children. I can go on and on and on about the mental health part of it, but the bottom line is foster parenting and adoptive, bless you. We need people that will step forward and do this. My experience is that many of them get hurt in the process because the counties are so overwhelmed that they draw the wagons when problems start to happen. They're not very helpful because they can't be, because they can't manage what they've got. I could go state by state and tell you some of the really hard cases and the troubles, but I won't.
We're talking with Mike Tikkanen, author of Invisible Children and What We Can Do About It. When we come back from break, we're going to talk to Mike about a concept of therapeutic foster care and how this may be the solution and what kind of statistics we have in support of therapeutic foster care, a concept that I was completely unfamiliar with until I read his book, which is a stunning expose on the invisible children that are in this system, and this system is broken. We'll hear that and more when we come back from break. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry, and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Mike Tikkanen, author of Invisible Children and What We Can Do About It. The invisible children caught up in a system that is just stunningly broken. Mike, welcome back to the program.
Thanks to be here. Thank you.
Mike, this mental health issue that's gripping the nation today, which is in many cases a self-inflicted wound, because it is preventable. I say that the number one cause of death, the number one preventable cause of death in America is abortion. Right? So the second most preventable cause of, I believe, coming before heart disease and coming before cancer, there's a bigger number of impacted families, impacted children because of a mental health issue. And we're using prisons, we're using inadequate foster care, we're using group homes, we're using what back in my day and your day were facilities that were only for the purpose of administering sedatives and treating mental illness with mind-altering drugs dating back to my birth year of 1952. You've seen it in your lifetime as well, is that we're quick to prescribe and slow to heal. How staggering is this across this nation of approximately, what, 360 or 380 million individuals, American citizens? What percentage or what number of children are impacted by this crisis?
Well, the study done at Washington State out of St. Louis recently was 37% of American children will be reported to Child Protection Services by the time they are 18 years old, unless they are from African American families, and then it becomes 54%. In the juvenile justice system, two-thirds of the kids are on juvenile justice system. Two-thirds of the kids are on psychotropic medications. And I between one-third and half, 64% is the high side, 50 is the low side. Between one-third and half of them are multiple drugs for chronic and dangerous mental health issues. When you get into child protection across the nation, about a third of the kids in child protection that are state wards they're forced onto psychotropic medications. When 7-year-old Gabriel Myers hung himself in Florida a few years ago, he left a very articulate note about how he hated being forced to take Prozac. He was a state ward boy. When Kendria Johnson in my state, not far from where I live, was suicided, she hung herself, 6 years old, in a foster home. She left a note too. Nobody mentioned those drugs, but I'm pretty sure they were involved. On every package, they say this drug may cause suicidal ideation. No one knows what that is. I know what that is. Fully formed thoughts of killing yourself just show up like a daydream. And these kids don't know how to handle it. And the people that give them the drugs try as hard as they can, but because we put so few resources into mental health help, as like you talked a bit about with the therapeutic foster homes and things like that, it's not as complicated as it looks. I mentioned the DSM, that manual that the shrinks use for, that's a complicated book. We don't need that. What we need is to understand the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. If you've got a lot of them, you've got more trauma in your life. If you've got more trauma in your life, your brain developed differently. It's actually a scientific study now. Epigenetics is a scientific study showing how genes express themselves. So by the fourth or fifth generation of abused and neglected children having abused and neglected children, the amygdala as it's pronounced, is larger. And the brain doesn't develop its executive function of critical thinking and the ability to make good decisions. That's why my kids do terrible things, because they are unable really to sit in a chair and learn and read in school. They're impacting our schools in a very negative way. We need to treat them a little differently. We need to help them heal through trauma-informed approaches so they can gain the coping skills that they need to get through life. And coping skills is what it's all about. You and I, we've got coping skills. We can fall down and get up and fall down and get up because we learned. We were lucky. We went to college maybe. We got a good job. We've got insurance. These kids got nothing. They didn't get help from their parents. They couldn't make it in school. And the ones that end up in foster care, 80% of them lead dysfunctional lives. Our prisons are full. The expense to the nation is horrendous. It's making our communities unhappy. It's tough to be a social worker, tough to be a teacher, tough to be a police officer. I feel sorry for the people doing the work. They're trying their hardest. They're in it. They're committed. But we have to start at the bottom. Mental health issues, trauma-informed services, understanding what happened to help them heal.
Mike, you know, as you're talking about this, we have a global or federal initiative, not global, but national initiative for dealing with the opioid crisis. And as you're describing this, if you're starting to give pills to a child at 2, 3, and 4 years old, then all they know is taking pills. You're developing a behavior pattern that says that at 15, 16, and 17, I'm supposed to be taking pills. By the time I'm 21 or 22, I'm going to find pills that I like because now I can go out there in the free market and get what I want that's going to make me feel the way I like to feel versus the way those other things made me feel. And maybe the core of the opioid crisis is not the opioids, but the pattern that we've created with raising children by giving them drugs at an earlier age that creates a habit of having this fixation on self-medication because they've been medicated from the time they started demonstrating what may have been considered to be aberrant behavior. And rather than look at the root cause of that behavior, we're treating the symptoms and not the root cause. Is this your findings as well?
It's a big, big problem. And the mention of the pharma companies paying billions, that's a big part of this problem. I had a boy who was on multiple medications, one of which was Ritalin. And I discovered that Ritalin is a cocaine derivative And he learned that. He liked the street cocaine better. Ritalin was banned in Sweden in 1968 because of the suicides. And we are now experiencing the suicidal behavior. It is so hard to believe a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old child could figure out how to kill themselves. You think about that? I just bleed when I think about it. These kids do. I had many kids try and kill themselves. I've been on airplanes to take the kids to suicide places far away because we didn't have enough of them here. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, HCMC sees 800 to 1,000 emergency psych visits a month. That's one hospital in Minneapolis. And the hospitals in northern Minnesota and in rural areas are turning away mental health problems because they can't cope with them. And I could get into that. In the state of Pennsylvania, 10 years ago, they eliminated all the mental health services in the high schools. All those kids went to jail. I'm sure that's been changed since then, but I can go state by state and give you some bad examples of terrible behaviors we have.
So, I think we've done a pretty good job in these first 30 minutes or so in establishing the magnitude, the scope of the problem. Let's start taking a look and trying to navigate some of the approaches which have been successful in dealing with this issue on a smaller scale that may be able to be scaled so that it becomes something that is more effective and more causal related as opposed to symptom related. What are some of the things you have in your book about therapeutic foster care, resulting in 73.5% fewer felony assaults and a 37% reduction in crime after intervention, as opposed to those placed in other kinds of group care? This is extraordinary. And the study found that for every dollar spent in the justice system, the same dollar spent on therapeutic foster care saved $14.07. That's a 1,400% return on the dollar. If somebody offered me that investment, I think I'd take it. How about you?
There are two things that come to mind. One is that when we understand the nature of trauma and how to deal with it,
we're talking with Mike Tikkanen from Minnesota, author of the book Invisible Children, and what we can do about it. It is a deep dive study on what is the crisis going on in America today. Now we're back with Mike again, and Mike, your system froze up there for just a moment, but we've got you back on now. So if you'd start your answer over again in regards to the therapeutic foster care.
I have two parts that I'd like to address. One is that when a family, a foster family, an adoptive family, has the training and understands what they're dealing with and the level of trauma the child has been put through, the chances of building coping skills go up by 100%. I mean, it's just so helpful, because the punishment model we have used is not only not working, it's counterproductive. It drives the child away and away from any better behaviors. Learning how to trust again, learning how to cope is a real serious thing. The second thing I like to address in this conversation about children's mental health is a program run by what was called the Washburn Center for Children's Mental Health in Minneapolis. Now it's just the Washburn Center. They deal with the whole family, and they teach the parents how to teach the child. And really, once there's an understanding and less reliance on Prozac, Ritalin, and Zoloft, and those drugs that cause children to feel different, and they hate it, they really do. It makes them stupid. I've actually been on them. I understand what I'm talking about. Everything from suicidal ideation to feeling stupid. A 5-year-old doesn't need that, and they don't understand that. And so when the family can get involved and really understand what needs to happen, the child then comes out of, whether it's foster care or into adulthood, with the skills needed to live a life. My whole experience in child protection tells me we don't do that today. And so therapeutic foster care is probably the most effective thing we could ever do for kids in child protection. Just recognizing the value of solid mental health training and the learning of coping skills and how to deal with problems and not make them worse.
Mike, is there a system in every state? I know there's the National Institute of Mental Health, there's the Child Welfare League of America, A Home Within, screening for mental health, but the people that don't have access to databases and information and where do we start with the solution? Where does it begin?
Well, I will again try and answer it in two different ways. The first way is to understand what we're talking about. There are two books that I'm going to recommend, not mine. The first book is called The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score. It defines mental health in a new way. The second book defines the larger issue. That, by the way, these are both written by medical people. They're very readable, and I can't tell you everything inside of those books that you need to know if we're going to really solve this problem. The second book is called The Deepest Well, and that defines America's problem with abused children and the mental health issues attendant to the problem and what to do about it. Now, I, at Kids at Risk Action and visiblechildren.org, write every week, and we have a free update under the Get Involved button weekly. We write stories, we gather data, we show people what is happening, where they are, and what they can do about it. So I recommend visiblechildren.org to get involved, read these books, understand. Most importantly, the concept of knowing a little bit more about it and staying involved and learning enough to call your state rep at some point and say, hey, we need that crisis nursery. We need to support these foster parents. We need to do these things. Every community is different, and every community has a chance to do more. Volunteering as little as once a year to go to the State House and ask for things that help children. If the society decides mental health is an issue that needs to be addressed, it'll get addressed. And whether you're Republican or Democrat, it's a full force attack. It's going to take the church. It's going to take people in the neighborhoods. It's going to take the government. It's going to take us all because it's a big, big problem.
Now, is CARA a 501c3?
It is, yes.
Okay, so it's a registered 501c3. That's CARA stands for Kids at Risk Action. And you can find information about that at invisiblechildren.org. How to get involved, how to volunteer, how to donate, how to get weekly email updates. They have an ambassador speaking program. Mike speaks himself to all kinds of organizations, including churches. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay. All right, so this issue is widespread, and how is corporate, I see the corporate America get involved in United Way or the American Cancer Society fundraising. All those are wonderful organizations, but we have more children at risk than we have cancer patients, I believe. I believe we have more children at risk than we have heart patients. I think we have more children at risk than we have now. These, in a lot of cases, are very personal matters and personal issues for someone who has a family member with cancer, and that's certainly understandable. They have support groups or Celebrate Recovery or whatever different programs are at the personal level. But at the national level, we have a crisis with our children. And we have a crisis that is a crisis upon a crisis because the parents are in crisis because they were traumatized. Now they're traumatizing their children, and they're traumatized, and they will then go out and traumatize others, including their own offspring, because this has become the pattern, the way of life from generation to generation. And back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, such a thing was never spoken of. It occurred probably at the exact same percentile levels as it occurs today, but it was unspoken. Pregnancy was unspoken. Out of wedlock pregnancy was unspoken. Cancer was at a whisper. There were things you just didn't talk about, and this was one of those things you didn't talk about. There was no mechanism for reporting these kind of things. Now there's a mechanism, and maybe that mechanism is broken, and maybe that mechanism needs to be fixed. But you are the voice for those that do not have a voice. And in your opinion, what would be the top 3 things that would be a call to action that you would want our audience to respond to?
Awareness building to learn. So whether you join our website, read those books, take a step in that direction. There's a lot to know. Take a little piece of it. Go where you want to go with it. And there are so many volunteer opportunities. A CASA volunteer has to put in a CASA Guardian Ad Litem program like I'm part of, 45 hours of training, 18 months commitment. It's a big deal. On the other hand, for Safe Passages for Children, they ask you to show up once a year at the State House and read a little thing and say to your state representative, please support crisis nurseries in my community. There are so many big brothers and big sisters, the prevent child abuse organizations. There's so many organizations one can be a part of. Just take that first baby step. I always ask people to go to our website, invisiblechildren.org, go to get involved and sign up for our weekly updates. Friday mornings, you always get something at 9 o'clock, and it'll wake you up as to what's going on. And we do report on state by state by state. That's under the real stories and sad stories and glad stories. But we need everybody to know a little bit more, to do a little bit more. And really, it's a passionate thing. Once you get your toe in the water, it's hard to get, keep your body from jumping in.
All right. And let us leave this interview on a high note. Share with me one of the breakthrough success stories that you've had that can encourage our audience that because of involvement, because of therapeutic care, because of the right kind of approach to a troubled child, an abused child, share with us one, what we would call a praise report, a glad story from your website.
I spoke to the Masons some years ago, a pretty large group, and at the end a man raised his hand. And again, these are mostly older adult men, and he stood up and he looked at me and he said, yes, I was a foster boy. And the man was covered in tattoos. He was a big man. And he said, these people, they really wanted me to succeed. These people that didn't know me from anywhere, he came and got me, and I was a foster child and then adopted. And he said, and now I make a lot of money, I got a lot of friends, and I know who to trust and who not to trust. He was a wonderful example of a mentor, someone showing up. The kids in this program that I'm in often have 20, 30 adults a year in their life, but no single adult for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. That stuff's got to happen.
So people can get involved, and I'm speaking especially right now to church organizations, that we have a crisis here in our borders. And I know many take humanitarian trips to other countries throughout the world, but this is a problem we have here at home. And yes, we are commanded to go out into the world to share the good news and the gospel, but we're also called to ministry begins at home. And this is a home problem here in the United States of America, the greatest republic, a democracy, freedoms abound, and we have a crisis in America right now with a problem with abused and neglected children, a broken system that people are doing the best they can, but there is not an equipping program because there's just not enough people to equip to become therapeutic foster care advocates. And so I want to encourage you to read this book, Invisible Children, to get involved through the website of invisiblechildren.org and the work that Mike has done and the incredible magnitude of this problem. If you want to make a difference in your own community, whether or not you're in rural, whether or not you're in urban, doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what your denomination is, it doesn't even matter whether or not you believe in God. You believe in mankind and making yourself better. I want you to believe in God. It is my desire for you to know the salvation that can only be found in a relationship with the Messiah, the one who came to die for your sins. But even so, for you out there that haven't made that decision yet, I want to encourage you that when you see the face of a child that's been tormented and tortured, and you give them a hug for the first time, and you begin to listen to them and to relate to them and to offer them comfort and to be equipped to handle the outburst and to know that that is not because of something you've done, but because of what's been done to them. It's not because of your righteousness that you do the right thing. Or it's not because you do the right thing that makes you righteous. It's your righteousness that makes you do the right things. And that's what we're supposed to be doing as a country, as a community, as a family, as an American, here within these borders of the United States, to offer to the least of these. And these are the marginalized, the invisible children who have no voice. They are what the Bible calls the least of these. And we are called to minister to them. Mike Tikkanen, thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights into this problem, to bring it to the forefront of our audience and to making them aware. Because unless we become aware of the magnitude of the problem, we can't begin to even think about the potential for solutions. So it begins with awareness and education. And I challenge our audience to read the book, Invisible Children, and what we can do about it. Mike Tikkanen, thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, my friend. I've enjoyed this immensely.
God bless you. And that brings to an end our live broadcast day, but that doesn't mean we go off the air. These interviews rebroadcast all throughout the day, 24 hours, until we're back here in the studio tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. Until we see you right back here from our studios in Birmingham, Alabama, we bid you shalom.